confused to hear a case like this, considering nothing has happened as of yet. This is a situation, it seems, of which this woman designed this website, wanted to take on these services of creating kind of wedding websites, and then said specifically in her design and promoting what she's going to do that she will not service same-sex couples, and then said to herself, wait a minute, you know what? If I put this out, I might get in trouble. And so that subsequently was elevated to the Supreme Court. How does that even happen?
Well, so that is possible, to go to court, to lower courts, and make your way up to the Supreme Court and say, I need to know if I exercise my rights as I understand them, I'm going to be in jeopardy. And it really kind of gave them an advantage here because, as I said, they really want to focus on this question of something expressive or artistic. But Yasmin, we have to mind that, because that, of course, is not a small category. That can describe lots of things that lots of businesses can do. I mean, imagine a nail salon that says, I'm not going to do the nails of brides who are going to get married of someone of a different race because I don't believe in interracial marriage, and so on and so on. I mean, this could really blow a big hole in anti-discrimination laws for businesses that serve the public.
Whenever I was going out to Central Baptist Church, whenever I was a member out there for almost a year, even went so far as helping them towards raise money and work with the college up here and sung in the choir. This was, I think, in 2016. As soon as they passed the law of same-sex marriage, that's whenever Randy Brundridge basically throwed his hands up in the air and said, I will no longer perform any type of formal or informal marriages with anybody. In other words, he was cutting it off towards the heterosexual, just like the homosexual, that he wasn't going to participate. And, you know, looking at it from his perspective, he's got that right as a mayor of Martin. That way he ain't being prejudiced one way or the other. He just cutting the whole tides off towards breaking away from that responsibility. But now, if you got a business in the eyes of the people, is it any different than what this particular business done, or owner of this business done, and not wanting to assist a alternative lifestyle people in making this cake because they knew who they was and what they was about, versus all the churches around here that wouldn't even let me so much as step foot in any of their sanctuaries, even though I may have been invited either as a guest or a visitor to go into that particular sanctuary. There wasn't really and truly but one or two, maybe three or four at the very most, churches around in this area that didn't renege against that same type of prejudicism. And one of those churches was the Union City First Pentecostal Church pertaining to Brother Kagum. He was one that always told me, you're always welcome here, no matter who you are, no matter what you are, you're always welcome here. There was another church up towards Union City, just before you get into Union City on the Martin Union City Road, on the right-hand side at the first red light there. I forgot now the name of the church. But that brother in the Lord, after me going there, I guess for about maybe a month or so, I had a little sit down, a little powwow with him. And once he identified that my interpretation of the Bible was obviously different than his, he basically done the same. He basically, I believe, committed an act of prejudicism by telling me something. He said, Dennis, you're always welcome to come to this church, strictly as either a visitor, a guest, or even a member. He said, but I'm letting you know right now, you will never, ever be allowed to work in the clergyman towards either being a teacher or any type of ministry pertaining to this. And I asked him, I said, well, why is that? He said, because we've already got our established bylaws and how that we have interpreted the Bible. And he said, if somebody like you come into the organization, he said, you would basically be changing our covenants towards what we believe and how that we believe it and what that we have been taught. And he said, once it reaches that level, you're talking about the changeover of a whole new, different organization, a different church. I said, in other words, I'm welcome, but my philosophy or my ideology isn't welcome. And he looked at me with all sincerity, because I really love this particular church, because they really go out of their way towards the deaf and dumb, towards the retarded, towards people that's born with mentally challenged situations in their lives. I really and truly felt like that maybe because that they was open to this type of atmosphere with various people's needs, that they would be more susceptible in allowing me to come there. But he let me know real quick, yeah, you can come here. You can come here as a guest or a visitor, but don't come here in the understanding that you're going to grow and eventually we're going to delegate you over to a spot to where you can start teaching or even possibly start preaching out of the pulpit. He said, I'm letting you know right now that will never happen in this organization. So that let me know where he stood, and he's prejudiced in the way that he believes what he believes. And basically, I throwed my hands up and said, you know what? I can't do this body of people any good towards trying to teach them the truth out of the Bible. So I basically quit going there. And there was some really, really good, sincere people that went to that church. Because any group of people that's willing to work with the retarded, work with the handicapped, work with those with mentally challenged. I mean, it wasn't nothing unusual to be in the service and all of a sudden one of them scream out, holler out something, because they're just, they're not within themselves in how that they conduct themselves, either in private or in the eyes of the public. And because of it, the whole church had to become, I guess the right word would be calloused or used to that type of activity, to the degree that whenever one of them did scream out or do something to one another or pick at one another or whatever, it didn't disrupt the class. It didn't disrupt the message. They kept going. They kept going because it was something that they had become adjusted to. It was something that they realized that because of that type of environment that was in there, that you're prone of having these type of outlandish screams or yells or conflicts to go on. And because of it, they settled it down real quick. They didn't make a big deal out of it, and they went on with the speaker, whoever the speaker was talking. They went on with the message, in which I really and truly honored that about them. I love that about them, because they was willing to work with people with these type of challenges, because not every group of people out there is going to be willing to work with people with these indifferences, and they was. But the minister let me know real quick, pertaining to where he stood towards being prejudiced. He said, this will never fly in this body of people, and me as a minister, me as a leader, me as a shepherd, shepherding the sheep, will not allow for you to ever come in here and have any type of influence with this body of people. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, that's pretty strong. But at least he was willing to let me come, to where most of them around here wasn't even willing to let me come in. They didn't want me to walk in there. And the reason why that most of them didn't want me to walk into their sanctuary is because they'd done already gotten online, and they'd done already dogged me out. They'd done already diminished me. They've done already prejudged me. They had done already condemned me, pertaining to a lot of the people with all the gossip around here. Once more, I even had family members, not just family, but family members that wanted to believe the worst about me. because that's the way that society is built. Society rather believe the worst about somebody than they would the best about somebody, because it makes them feel better. It makes them feel better about themselves. It puts that person in their mind on a lower status of guilt, even if it's false guilt, because then they can say, well, you done this, 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 and this. Well, you ain't no better than this, this, and this. That was one of the things, that was one of the common things around here that I heard whenever Jimmy Swaggart fell, pertaining to him being caught with a prostitute in 1988, is that he wasn't no better than we was. He wasn't no better than we was. And that's how they examined that situation. That's how they judged that situation, and that's how they condemned that situation. And man, did they ever cut that ministry off from a hot water to a cold drip. And now, since 1988, now we've seen the way that this country has turned. It has turned into the pits of hell. It has turned into a very, very ungodly, rootless, unsettling, unsafe nation that now we have to put up with on a day-to-day level.
Seems certainly like a slippery slope, especially so preemptively here. Tali Farhadi and Weinstein, we thank you. Appreciate it. All right, everybody, still ahead. We got a lot more to go. Former President Trump's call for the termination of the Constitution to put him back in power. What, if any, reaction we are getting from Republican leadership? But up first, we're going to hear why one Iranian protester told me there is no stopping these demonstrations. And we're going to talk to activist and actress Nassim Pedrad about what she is asking the United Nations to do about Iran. You're watching Jose Diaz-Balart reports. We'll be right back.
Getting on the recording that's fixing to come on pertaining to Iran, I still say that what that evil regime over there is doing is totally wrong in controlling people's lives, especially women's lives, like they're a bunch of sex slaves or a bunch of dogs. But the thing about it is, sweatshops and etc. goes on all over the world, that even American companies are profiting off a lot of those particular people that's being done this way. I still say, and I'll always say, that the women in America dress too provocatively, the way that they want to show their skin and not leave nothing for the imagination, to the degree that the evil administration, if you want to call it that, or a regime over there in Iran, don't want to give women enough leadway towards even being able to show their face, other than maybe their hands and their feet. I mean, there has to be some sort of middle ground. There has to be some sort of balance of going entirely too far versus not controlling the way that people want to dress in front of people here in America and in other places of the world. Spain, France, the Alps, Switzerland. I mean, I can go on and on and on, how that they think that it's okay basically to walk around with a string bikini, leaving nothing for the imagination, and it be acceptable in the eyes of God. I've never seen nothing like the differences that we face today, that one can be just as far wrong to the far left as the other one can be wrong to the far right. And if we're not smart enough to bring this together in identifying what the devil is trying to do here towards bringing a calamity between mankind and God, eventually it will be mankind that will suffer the consequences, because God will bring down his wrath upon this great planet, to the degree that we'll suffer the consequences for not making those arrangements, or not smartening up to the works of the devil that has been deceiving not only the American people but the world for years and years and years. If you're going to walk around admitting that you're a born-again believing Christian, there are certain requirements in that walk. And once you are no longer willing to abide by those requirements, then God himself is no longer required to have to abide by the things that he has told you that he would abide by if you was a believer in him. Why? Because your actions speak louder than your words. And when that happens, that's whenever the Father basically lifts his protected hand, either up off of that person or up off of that community or up off of that family or up off of that nation, and that nation will wreak whatever problems that they have to wreak. They'll wreak it in ways unimaginable, and that can be anything from pandemics to divorces, to abortions, to gun violence, to drug overdoses, to seeing 5,000 people coming over the border illegally every day, being $30 trillion in debt. I can go on and on and on, and I think whoever listens to this or gets hold of this, they'll understand that. They'll understand just exactly what I'm talking about. I'm going to bring this up real quick. There was a certain group of people up here in Sharon, Tennessee, in Weakley County, that was good friends with my biological father. And because of that, in which what occurred with my life with Homeland Security in 1989 as well as 1991, they automatically put me in a pedestal towards me being the bad guy, me being the monster. Now, it wasn't until I come back here in 2014 to where some of them same people that wanted to demonize me and dehumanize me that way actually started compromising on some of their remarks towards saying, because the way that the world had turned, especially the way that our country had turned so crappy, they started saying stuff like, well, I don't know, maybe he deserved to be threatened. I never threatened a president. Never have, never will. I'm not that stupid to threaten a judge or anybody that works for any type of government other than the demonic government or the demonic governments of that in which what they're doing to their own people. And, of course, the main perpetrator is the Saudi Arabians that obviously our government embraced, buddied up with, supported, that basically caused the destruction of thousands and thousands of lives all over the world, because they was a known terrorist advocate group of people that if they themselves was not committing the acts of terrorism, they was financing the people that was committing the acts of terrorism, including 9/11 and the dismemberment of a American journalist. So, you know, whenever a person, a family, a country, a state, a community decides to go left versus right, there's consequences. And these consequences is coming in the form of any and everything imaginable. Just like the consequences of the major, horrendous forces of nature that now we're having to put up with here in America and throughout the world, a people that was in denial about climate changes, just like people that was in denial about the Bible, just like people that was in denial about the Windmill Ministry's message, people that didn't want to support the messenger because they didn't like the message or they didn't believe in the messenger that was giving forth the message. There's consequences. And that's where we are today as a nation in 2022, December the 5th, December the 5th. Basically, about 25 days from now, we'll be looking at the first of the year. We'll be going into 2023. I want you to listen to this, please.
Everybody, it's 20 past the hour this morning. The status of Iran's morality police remains unclear after reports Iran's attorney general said the controversial agency would be, quote, abolished and the mandatory hijab law was being reviewed. The reported comments come in amidst months of protests in Iran after a young woman, Mahsa Amini, died in the hospital after being taken into custody by the country's morality police. But a senior Biden administration official telling NBC News the U.S. is skeptical Iran is loosening laws regarding the hijab, and this might just be a tactic to quell planned protests this week. Iranian state media has pushed back on the initial report, and there has also been no comment or confirmation on the matter from Iran's supreme leader, the president, interior minister, or police. The official who made the statement is not responsible for overseeing the morality police. And according to NBC News' Tehran bureau, the morality police have not been visible for some time and are not the chief enforcers arresting and punishing protesters. Joining us now, NBC News Tehran bureau chief and correspondent Ali Arouzi. Ali, it is great to talk to you on this. I gotta say, as I listened yesterday to the Attorney General in his statements, it was very convoluted, as it often is with many of these individuals. And when I spoke to Iranians on the ground there yesterday as well, they didn't necessarily buy it, the context or what he was ultimately saying. What more are we learning about this moment?
Hey, Yasmin, well, you're absolutely right. It's deliberately convoluted. That's what they do. They don't want things to be clear for anybody. And they have reasons for doing that. So what's very important to point out is this isn't some massive concession that the government is making. From what I'm understanding right now and what's being discussed in Parliament is that they want to remove the physical presence of the morality police from the streets and enforce it remotely with cameras, with facial recognition systems that would spot women that are not wearing their headscarves and then fine them or stop them from going to the bank or doing whatever other normal activities you need to do during the day. So they're just going to try and enforce it, not physically on the streets. And that's not something of their own doing. That's something the people of Iran have brought about because they simply can't enforce it anymore, Yasmin. About 60% of the people in Tehran and other major cities and towns refuse to wear the hijab. They don't even wear the manteau anymore, that loose-fitting gown that you have to wear. So you see women walking around in jeans and a t-shirt like any other city in the world, refusing to wear a headscarf. And if they were going to try and enforce that, you'd have to arrest over half the population of every city and town. So it's unenforceable. Another reason that they probably made this statement right now is that the timing is suspicious. On the eve of the day that they are calling for mass protests and strikes in Iran, they suddenly make this announcement as a sort of a ruse to deflect people's attention, but it didn't work. Everybody in social media is saying, we don't care about that. We have got much bigger issues to resolve in this country, and it's us that got rid of the hijab, not the morality police. And we have a lot more strides to make. So I wouldn't make any big deal about them coming out and saying, we're going to loosen the restrictions on the headscarf. And I think things are just going to carry on in the way they are right now.
It's such a fantastic point, Ali, kind of this different now iteration of what it seems of the morality police, that it's not a result of any concessions that the Iranian government is making. It is a result of the continued protest of the Iranian people day in and day out over the last couple of months. And also there has been so many different versions of the morality police over time. Of course, at one point, as you well know, being called the Comité, and then it was obviously the name changed to subsequently the morality police. So it seems as if this is yet another version of that. Ali Arouzi, as always, my friend, it is great to see you. Thank you for your reporting on this. So following those comments, everybody, about the disbanding of the morality police, I spoke to one of the thousands of protesters on the ground in Iran. We are not identifying her due to concerns over her safety. Here's some of what she told me.
I don't think that the protests will stop, even if the morality police, or as some in the past have liked to use the euphemism fashion police, were to be legally and formally abolished. That would not dissuade the Iranian public from attaining the higher collective goal that has formed, which targets the core and the essence of the dictatorship we've been living under. With all the murder and bloodshed and arrests and the looming danger of execution for those detained, most us Iranians have grown exponentially angrier and see it as betrayal to go about our usual lives and pretend that nothing's happened.
All right, let's talk more about this. Joining me now, activist and Iranian-American actress Nasim Pedrad. She is working to have Iran removed from the UN Commission on the Status of Women. Nasim, it's great to talk to you. Thanks for joining us on this. You just heard from that protester inside Iran that I spoke to yesterday, along with our correspondent Ali Arouzi, who is our Tehran bureau chief. And obviously now it seems as if The story is it is a different iteration of the morality police as a result of the continued protests of Iranians on the ground. All of that being said, what is your reaction?
You know, listen, thanks for having me, Yasmin. Women are going into the streets without a hijab, but it's certainly not because any of the laws have changed. In fact, they're literally risking their lives in order to freely express themselves. And 2 months into this revolution, you know, approximately 18,000 citizens have been detained and arrested. But even if the government were to ease up on restrictions, that would be a great development if this, you know, revolution was only about that, but it's not. Compulsory hijab is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this regime's systemic oppression of women. I mean, misogyny and oppression is in the DNA of this regime. You know, in particular with gender discriminatory laws that are enshrined, that this government is quite proud of. So, you know, while the death of Mahsa Amini in custody of the morality police was certainly the entry point and what sparked this, the revolution has become so much broader than that. Iranian people do not want reform. They want this government gone. They want this government removed. That is what they're chanting in the streets. They want a secular democracy. They want freedom of speech and expression. They want to not be disconnected from the Western world like they have been the last 43 years. So, you know, in a revolution where things have escalated to the point where women as young as 14 are being raped in detainment and small children are being killed on the streets, you know, the morality police at this stage is truly irrelevant. We are so past that. And it wouldn't be, you know, surprise me if the government were to, they've tried this before in lobbying with the UN, dole out crumbs of concession under the guise of reform. But the Iranian people aren't falling for it, and I would caution the international community not to either.
So, Nassim, while I have you, I do want to talk about the work that you are doing as part of the diaspora as well. I know that you're here in New York, meeting at the UN with UN ambassadors. The goal here for you, alongside other activists, we're showing an image of you here, is for Iran to be removed from the UN Commission on the Status of Women. What would that removal mean? I believe the vote is happening December 14th.
That's right. Well, you know, we're asking the UN to remove Iran, like you said, from this commission, and this would be a precedent setter, which with the UN, sometimes member states are reticent or even concerned about creating a precedent, but they should be far more concerned about the Islamic Republic being on this commission and actually determining what women's rights are globally. Keep in mind, this is an open vote. This won't be done by secret ballot. So we should all be paying attention to the countries that are voting. And if any of the states vote no or even abstain, that is a vote for the gender apartheid Islamic Republic, and it would be shameful. You know, the CSW is a place where complaints about the violations against women's rights, everything from arbitrary, you know, detention to the torture of women, are brought forth. And so it's outrageous that those complaints would then be assessed by the Islamic Republic, which is the very perpetrator of all the violations the CSW is trying to warn against. So, you know, I don't know how this many countries were asleep at the wheel and letting them on the commission to begin with, but they did, and they need to right this wrong and vote to remove the Islamic Republic on December 14th.
And you, along with other activists, are doing the work on the ground there that is needed on behalf of the diaspora and the protesters in Iran. Nassim, as always, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it, my friend. All right, coming up next, everybody, we are just minutes away from jury deliberations in the Trump Organization fraud case. We are live outside the court with what is at stake. You are watching Jose Diaz-Balart Reports. We'll be right back.
Find your beat, your moment of calm. Find your potential.
I want to back it up real quick. It's really awful, especially in today with so much communication with satellite, TV, to think that people are still living in confined darkness where countries can keep them under suppression like this, and the people haven't stood up yet against this type of tyranny. It's really awful in today's society, especially in the design and the event of the International College Exchange Student Program, where so many people that does have a little bit extra money, if they're in one of these countries, if they go through the proper proceedings, they can come to America, they can go to school, and they can either remain here or go back to their country and take that particular craft and use it for the benefit of their own citizens in their own country. To think that this has not yet merged, to think that this has not yet come to the surface pertaining to how that other people don't force people in doing things like this anymore, to think that these people still think that they can do this is an absolute disgrace above all other disgraces. To think that the Persian Empire over there is still being run like it was thousands of years ago. Thousands of years ago. You know, I tried. I really did. I tried to make a stance here in America pertaining to that in which what the Heavenly Father had given to me to give to the people, and giving them the warnings about certain things that was going to come up. I even went to the extent of being incarcerated several different times by various people that didn't want this particular message to go forth. I sacrificed in total over 2 years of my life, which I know that don't sound like a lot to an average everyday criminal, but I don't consider myself as being a criminal towards getting out here wanting to village, steal, rob, rape, lie, and harm and hurt any and everybody around me. A matter of fact, I consider myself as being just the very opposite, in a godly sense, towards trying to help people. But you know, once you have sacrificed so much, including the death of a brother that was brought on by this community that wanted to bring the pressures upon him because he wouldn't run me off, because they wanted me out of this off this property and out of this community, to think that so much had been sacrificed in the name of righteousness' sake, and the people still not wanting to come clean pertaining to all this, only speaks volumes about the people that has created this environment. And it's not just the environment over there, it's the environment over here with all the ungodliness going on, all the shootings and killings, all the rapes, all the crime. You know, the person recently that are persons that done what they done over in North Carolina towards sabotaging that electrical grid system over there. As far as I'm concerned, people like that, they need to lock them up and throw the key away and throw them in a prison system like over in Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. That way they'll know just exactly what true tyranny and terrorism is. Anybody that wants to create havoc and try to bring harm and hurt to their own people deserves the fullest punishment to the fullest extent of the law. And as far as I'm concerned, our government, of people working within our government, are the very people that still to this day, and various locals around here, that have played a part in trying to bring destruction into an individual's life that didn't deserve this type of ridicule, or this type of tyranny that was brought upon to the founder of the Windmill Ministries. As far as I'm concerned, there will be a special place in hell for these people that have acted and participated this way in the past 30 plus years. Now, my son will tell you, well, Dad, I didn't do nothing against you towards you doing what you was doing. Okay, maybe you didn't. But did you actually help your father? Did you actually help the founder of the Windmill Ministries towards getting this message out? I mean, even to this day, you would think by now my son would look upon the experience towards being able to go to New York City, Washington, D.C., and basically work the beat on the streets for about 2 months before I had to bring him back to go to school. This was in 1989. He was 10 years old. You would think that he would appreciate that by now towards saying, well, you know what? Dad went out of his way to take me, and he didn't have to take me. And I actually experienced something that most people in Tennessee don't never experience by actually going and living in the beat in Washington, D.C. and Maryland and going up towards New York City. But I guess to this day, he still resents me. He still resents because he feels like that I took something out of his life that summer that he could have been playing down in Memphis with the rest of his buddies down there. But instead, he was with his father. Well, he has no idea the seeds that I planted in him at the time that I planted them in him whenever he was only 10 years old. And I just give you one mild experience that we had, which we had many while we was up there. We was hot. We was working the circuit. We was right there in the middle of, I think it was Manhattan or wherever, where, my God, it looked like it was like 20 people thick on one side of the road or the street and about 20 people thick on the other side of the road. It was to the point that you couldn't hardly walk. But people was observing this apocalypse model that I had in the back end of the truck because it was a spiritual significance of biblical Bible prophecy. Well, it was so hot. I mean, the taxis, they was popping the hoods on their yellow taxis, was popping the hood on their vehicles to get more air circulating because their automobiles was getting hot during this time, that I pulled over and I gave my son some money. I said, go down here at this little Chinese store right over here and go in there and get us 2 soda pops. Of course, there's still like hundreds of people going by every minute, or maybe more, to the point that sometimes I couldn't even see my automobile, even though I had it parked on the side of the road, trying to keep an eye on my automobile, till finally I waited and waited and waited, and I got concerned. I'm thinking to myself, well, he should have done already come back by now. I got so frightened that I had lost my son in the middle of that group of people that I didn't no longer care about my truck, even though that was our life source to being able to get back to Tennessee. I immediately went to that little Chinese, whatever it was, and asked them if the little kid come in there wanted something to drink, that was trying to get some cold drinks, and they couldn't speak no English, and the only thing that they could talk to me was, yeah, there was a little kid in here. I finally got that out of them. But what happened to the little kid? And they pointed over this way, and about that time my son popped up with 2 cold drinks in his hand. Well, Dad, they told me they didn't have no cold drinks here, and I had to go down to the next store and get them. My heart literally almost went to my chest, or down to my stomach, or wherever, in understanding and realizing, my God, I almost lost my son in the middle of New York in broad daylight whenever there was thousands of people walking up and down the sidewalks. Once I got him in the truck and I, eased up a little bit and I wasn't near as freaked out over what was going on, I explained to him, I said, son, I thought I lost you. I literally thought that I had lost you, that you had either gotten lost or somebody had kidnapped you or somebody grabbed you up, any and all the above. In other words, I felt guilty that I had put him on this mission by himself at 10 years old in the middle of New York City. I don't know to this day, at his age, at 42, 43 years old, however old he is, born in 1979. I don't know if he understands what his father done in bringing him on that mission of the seeds that was planted, hopefully, in his heart, towards one day he will no longer have resistance or resentment against his biological father. But whenever we went to Washington, D.C., to the White House, and we went to all the representatives there, at that time, in 1989, you didn't have to go through all these different clearances. You could actually walk in to a representative's door, just like you could walk into your local mayor or your local whatever, and sit down and have a conversation with these people, and not have to go through no big rigmarole just to sit down there and talk to them. Me and him passed out all kinds of material that day inside the White House, and I believe we went to the Capitol building and 2 or 3 other buildings up there. It's so much up there that to this day I still find myself at awe in thinking that I had the nerve of going up there, not once, not twice, but 3 times in 1 year in Washington, D.C. Now, the other 2 times he didn't get to go with me because he had to go back to school. But at least I planted that seed in his heart towards what it is to get out here and be a representative for the Lord Jesus Christ and passing out material in his honor and not our own. I'm hoping that maybe one day the full maturity of that in which what I have done will finally set into his heart to the degree that he will realize that, hey, what my dad done was a good thing at the age of 10. Now, I haven't gotten to meet his new wife yet. I haven't even talked to her on the phone yet. Just as of about 2 days ago, we did have somewhat of a communications on the internet towards me sending a box of stuff down there, and she texted me back and told me how that she'd appreciated it. And then I texted her back towards telling her thank you, and thank you for becoming acquainted with my son and becoming my new daughter-in-law, and that I hadn't met her yet, but I asked her a question towards what basically convicted her towards coming to America in this quest that she was on towards wanting to get associated with the Americans over here. And she said that her first husband, was in the military, and I'm assuming the American military. Maybe she met up with him in over there somewhere because she's a Ukrainian, and they moved to California originally, and now she's down here at Memphis. I think she's got a daughter about 17, 18, maybe 19 years old by her first husband. And now she's hooked up with my son, and they've got married because now they're expecting a baby. I haven't got to meet her yet, but I do want to say this. My son, once he realized that Miss Shirley K. Jackson decided to walk out of my life for the second time in 2005, built a wall around himself, built a wall around his family, built a wall around his wife, to the degree, to this day, I still don't know who his first wife was, and I still don't know who the 3 boys was that he helped to raise. I don't know their characteristics. I don't know if they like ball games. I don't know if they're in politics. I do know that the youngest one has joined up with the military, and he's now in the Army. I do know that. But I'm just wondering if this wall of privacy, if he's going to build the same wall around this wife as he did the first wife, towards me basically not having any type of conversation or any type of dealings with her on the level of her being a daughter-in-law, the way that he did the first daughter-in-law. Because my son has a great deal of resentment for his dad, but yet now he claims to be on the same side that I'm on, pertaining to being on the side of the Lord Jesus Christ, which to me is contrary to the way a son should treat his father unless you are an atheist or unless you do believe in some other weirdo religion that you're abiding by, why would you be so frantic against not wanting to have a whole lot of interaction with your father, your biological father? Matter of fact, last year his conscience must have got to bothering him a little bit, and he contacted me after acting like he had sent me some sort of a Christmas gift. Well, next year, Dad, I'm gonna make it up to you, and I'm gonna get I'm gonna open up to you a little bit, and I'm gonna share myself with you a little bit more. Well, that year's passed almost. And as far as I'm concerned, he's just as distant today as he ever has been. Yeah, we've made a few telephone calls. Yeah, we've texted one another a little bit. But whenever I was communicating with his latest wife yesterday while they was leaving East Tennessee, going back to Memphis, Tennessee, he let me know real quick that I had stepped over the boundaries and to stop. Stop communicating. Stop aggravating. Stop talking. Stop being yourself, Dad. Stop! So these are areas that obviously he has yet to adapt to. These are areas that he has yet to accept pertaining to who his father is and what his father's about and what he's about. You know, before you're ever going to understand towards who everybody else is, you need to first understand who you are. And until my son is willing to do that to himself, towards identifying towards who he truly is, I don't know that we'll ever have a bonding father-son relationship, because that seed of division was planted in his heart just about the time that I got started into that ministry. And because of all the gossip, because of the way that my biological father turned against me, the way that my brothers would dogmatic me out towards talking about me and putting me down, and the way that this community did. In a way, I don't blame him, because he was basically influenced by his own stepfather, which was a foreigner that married his mother, which would have been my first wife. And God only knows the stuff that she brainwashed him into believing. Even though I'd fallen off a 4-story building and should have died, I was still trying to work with him and pay what child support that I could, plus healing up, plus getting back on my feet towards trying to get back to be self-supporting of myself. There ain't no telling what kind of information that she blowed into his head, or the foreigner, brainwashed him in believing that I was nothing but a deadbeat dad, even though I went down there and picked him up sometimes 2 or 3 times a month. Not only on my second wife, but my third wife, which was my fourth wife, during those 2 relationships that I had with both of those women. One of them wasn't but about a year, but the other one was about 15 years. During the event of both relationships in my personal life, I never abandoned him. I never treated him as if he was a stranger or that he wasn't my son. I always wanted to open up to him and be there for him. But to hear him talk, I was a deadbeat dad. And like I said, I tried to break a little bit of that ice yesterday by communicating with him and his second wife, and he let me know real quick that I was stepping into territory that I wasn't supposed to step into, towards stop. And it wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't it was an order. It was a requirement. And I know him well enough to know how he functions and how he is. But until he's willing to see how he is, and until he's willing to accept how he is, I'm basically dealing with a lost cause there in trying to get him turned around. And hopefully he'll mature. Hopefully he will, after I'm dead and gone, and this old world turns more shittier and crummier than what it already is, because people didn't want to support his dad. Hopefully he'll wake up and realize, you know what? If people would have just done the right thing, if he's already brought up the fact about my aunt that was worth over $1 million that she could have helped me, and he's already brought up this one and that one. Well, how come they didn't help? Well, if they would have helped you, you'd be a whole lot further along than what you are. Well, how about looking at yourself, son? If you would have supported your dad, if you would have got in the same corner that your dad was in pertaining to the ministry, maybe everybody else wouldn't have abandoned your dad the way that they did pertaining to this message. But that's neither here nor there. The fact of the matter is, women in the world are being mistreated, and it ain't just women. Of course, we emphasize more on women than we do just about anything, but it's children and it's men that basically are being ruled by these tyrants, by these evil, demonic barbarians over there. And until their own people are willing to make adjustments, they're never going to be able to see any type of reform. And that's what America was hoping for out of the Afghanistan people. That's the reason why we went over there and we dedicated over 20 years of our military personnel over there. And ultimately, when it was all said and done with, what happened? It blowed up in our military. It blowed up in the federal CIA Pentagon's face. Why? Because they didn't go over there in the right spirit. They didn't go over there being guided by God versus being guided by themselves. And everything this government has embarked up into for the past 30 plus years has basically backfired in their faces, to the degree that now I can sit back and say, well, yes, it's sad, it's miserably sad, it's heartbreakingly sad, but at the same time I can say, well, you know what, it couldn't have happened to a better group of people, because they was the ones, the adults, the baby boomers, the various administrations, beginning with the Reagans and the Bushes, going all the way back into the late 80s. Actually, my story began basically in the beginning phases of Ronald Reagan's administration, long about 1983. But I can honestly say that it couldn't have happened to a better group of people, because they did not go about this in the proper form, in a godly form, pertaining to accepting the message coming from God that was giving to the messenger to give to the people. So I can actually walk around with a very, very clean conscience on that level, because I know that I have not brought this condemnation into their lives. They have. They have brought the condemnation and the judgment into their own lives. I've tried to help them. I tried to tell them that they went to war with the wrong bunch of people, and they wound up stopping me in Wheeling, West Virginia, and took 6 months out of my life towards me being evaluated in Butner, North Carolina. That's what Homeland Security, that's what Secret Service, that's what the federal agency's done to the founder of the Windmill Ministries. And one day you can bet your you-know-what on it. It may not be in this lifetime, but in one day, I'm going to be able to tell my story, and I'm going to tell it accurately, and I'm going to tell it right down to the T, regardless whether it be about my father, my brothers, my mother, my grandmothers, my grandfathers, my uncles, my aunts, my cousins, or my friends, or my associates, or the United States government. I'm going to be able to tell my story. And if it falls upon to those that are guilty, upon to their feet, well, then so be it. Because I've tried to help them. I've tried to put out warnings. I've tried to put out advisories. I've tried to tell them that what they was embarked into, going all the way back into the late 80s, early 90s, pertaining to Desert Storm, Desert Shield, was wrong. President Ford tried to tell them it was wrong. Others has tried to tell them it was wrong, but they've done it anyway. So now we're at this stage where we're at right now, towards seeing total chaos. Good luck to all of us as we end this program by saying hello. God bless. Want to say I love you in the Lord. Good luck to all of us. And God bless America. God bless our American troops. And God bless our endeavors towards where we go from here. Because obviously for the past 30 plus years has been a disaster. Hopefully the next 30 years, 20 years, 10 years, or even 3 years will be more productive in the eyes of the Lord towards being able to settle these countries and settle these situations down to the point of actually seeing a peace or utopia. God bless you, and shalom.